Welcome to Self-Publishing with ALLi from the Alliance of Independent Authors. This week, it's our advice stream focusing on editing and design. Discover how you can apply best practices in these first stages of the publishing process to ensure the excellence of your work and its ability to appeal to your target readership. This Self-Publishing with ALLi podcast is sponsored by BookVault. Sell high-quality print-on-demand books directly to readers worldwide and earn maximum royalty selling directly. Automate fulfillment and create stunning special editions with BookVault Bespoke. Visit bookvault.app today for an instant quote. This podcast is also sponsored by Gatekeeper Press, the all-inclusive gold standard in publishing, offering authors 100% rights, royalties, satisfaction, and worldwide distribution. Gatekeeper Press, where authors are family. And here's your host for the Self-Publishing with ALLi podcast, ALLi Campaigns Manager, Matty Dalrymple.
Hello, everyone. I am Matty Dalrymple, the Campaigns Manager for ALLi, and I am here today with Roz Morris. Hey, Roz, how are you doing?
Hi, Matty. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It is always lovely to chat with you. And just to give our listeners a little bit of background on you, Roz Morris's novels and memoir have been recognized by major mainstream awards. She's coached award-winning writers in both fiction and nonfiction, taught creative writing for the Guardian Masterclasses, blogged for Writers and Artists Yearbook, and been a regular judge on Litopia's pop-up submission show, critiquing manuscripts from promising writers. And Roz is also ALLi's editor-in-chief. So she is a great person to be tapping into about all things editing, as we like to discuss on the stream of the podcast. But today we're going to be talking about ghostwriting, which I think is going to be interesting. It will be certainly interesting for writers who are thinking about ghostwriting as a career. It's going to be interesting for writers who are thinking about employing a ghostwriter, I think. But I just think it's interesting for writers in general to understand what goes into being a ghostwriter. So just start out talking a little bit about what drew you to that part of the writing business.
Well, I didn't really know very much about it until I got to know someone who needed a book written. That's usually how it happens. You meet someone who needs somebody who can write a particular kind of book. In my case, I was sort of shopping my novel around to agents and doing the usual kind of thing. But also, my husband is also a writer, and he had got a book project that he was doing. He handed it in time, but it turned out that there were actually 12 books in this series. They were novels. They were all being written at the same time by different people under one name. So these were all being ghostwritten by 12 different authors. And as you can imagine, this meant they got 12 manuscripts that didn't look like they were written by the same person at all. And they wanted to somehow adjust the book that my husband had written. And he said, it'd be easier if I just start all over again and write something. But actually, he didn't have time because he had another project. But he said to me, I know you could do this. This is the kind of thing you could just easily do. So I wrote the book in secret, handed it into the publisher. They said, hooray, that's exactly what we need. And then Dave said, well, actually, Roz wrote it. So I got in sort of by the back door, but then this publisher realized that I was a reliable person to write books when they needed a particular kind of thing written. And then my name just got shared around as someone who could do particular kinds of things. I found myself doing all sorts of kinds of books. So there would be novels, TV tie-ins, and some nonfiction as well, and adult crime thrillers, all sorts of things I've done. But it was all sort of by word of mouth, by people saying, I need someone to do this. Who might be free? Oh, try her.
That's interesting that you're ghostwriting across such a wide range of genres. Do you know if that's typical among ghostwriters? Do ghostwriters usually focus more on a specific genre?
Well, it's a thing that I think indie authors already know very well. We can actually do a lot of different things. While we may brand ourselves in different boxes because that's easier for readers, as writers, we can actually turn our hand to a lot of different things. And we read a lot of different things too, so that makes sense. And yeah, ghostwriters do tend to have things they know quite well and can do quite easily. What I now tend to do is I save myself for fiction. I don't tend to ghostwrite fiction very much now, but I ghostwrite nonfiction. But in the beginning, I was ghostwriting a lot more fiction. But then once I got my real writing voice as myself in fiction, I thought, no, I want to save that now. So that's what tends to happen, actually, because our names aren't going on the books. We don't have to worry so much about the effect in the marketplace about someone thinking, oh, well, Roz only writes that sort of thing, so that's what this book will be like, because Roz is invisible. And so, yes, we can be a lot more versatile than our kind of outside writing careers might allow us to normally be.
I always thought that one of the most challenging things about ghostwriting would be that obviously people are coming to you because of your writing skills. And yet when you're ghostwriting, you're needing to represent the voice of the person who is your client. So can you talk a little bit about how you strike that balance, like excellent writing, but writing that will be hopefully recognizable, I'll use air quotes, as coming from the person that you're ghostwriting for?
I think a good author, particularly a fiction author, is a good ventriloquist and like an actor. We can inhabit a lot of different characters, a lot of different mindsets, maybe different tones according to what suits the piece of fiction we're writing and the kinds of people we're writing about. So particularly for authors who are not genre-based, who will sort of find their way, a new way into something, it can be quite easy actually to just adopt a different persona. But you're right that it does have to seem as though it came from the person whose name is ultimately going to be on it. And also, that is what the reader is interested in. They actually want a book from the life and the mind and the heart of that particular person who's done those particular things. And that's usually what draws a publisher to somebody who can't necessarily write their own book. It's because they know that the readers will be thinking, I'd love a novel written by them.
Yeah. I can imagine a lot of people who are coming to ghostwriters are coming because they are already established in something other than writing. They're celebrities and now they want to get a book out into the world and they know they either don't have the skills or the time to do that. And I would think in that case, a ghostwriter could, if they wanted to, get to know their client pretty well by like interviews or whatever publicly facing content that person was sharing. In some cases, that's not going to be available. Do you have ways that you like to like get in the head of your clients so that you can present work that is in their voice?
Well, you get access to them while you're writing a book with them, and then they give you things that are going to go in the book and that aren't necessarily out in the public domain. Then you might have the fun choice of thinking, I would love to put this in a book, but I don't know if I dare. And, you develop a relationship with them and you decide, mostly the writer sort of will decide what's going to go in, and they might be working with an editor who will have particular requirements too. And the person on whose behalf you're writing, depending on how busy they are and how hands-on they want to be, they'll also decide too. So it's a collaboration, but you do develop a close relationship with them. And I rather like that. And the fact that I'm kind of doing something for them that they couldn't necessarily do themselves. And I genuinely like getting to know them and understand them so that I can do them justice on the page.
And what is the process for you doing that? Do you spend a lot of time interviewing them? Or are they sending you material that you're cleaning up and then questioning them about? What is that process like?
There are a number of different ways you can do it. Sometimes they've got roughs of material and they want you to read all that so that you understand where they're coming from. And then you sort of figure out what is usable and what else you need. Often you have to throw a lot away because they're not disciplined as writers, and then also not usually thinking in terms of a book with a particular direction. The thing I'm always looking for is, where are we going to land this book, whatever it is? And it often takes them quite a while to understand what that means. But sometimes they have lots of information to give you, lots of previous interviews and things to give you, so you can get a feel for what might be there and what the public might expect too. And then you do a lot of extra digging for yourself and find out what else needs to go in the book. And if it's fiction, you've got them to draw on for research. So research can be a lot easier and swifter than if you're having to research a topic from scratch yourself, because you've got them there and you can ask them things. But there'll always be extra things that you need to find out about, so you can make sure that the reader will understand what you're setting up and how things work. And so there's always a lot of research involved. Again, it helps if you have already written in that genre, because you will know what the requirements of that genre are, what the reader will be wanting of that book, as well as want their particular wishes when reading a book by that person. There's also sort of how it fits with what readers more widely in that genre want. So that, yes, there is a lot of background work before you start any writing, like any writing project, really.
I can imagine there could be circumstances where somebody comes to you thinking what they need is an edit, but in fact, what they need is a ghostwriting. Like,
Yes.
have you ever had or just are familiar with circumstances where someone says, oh, here's my book and it just needs a polish. And then you realize that it really needs to be completely reworked. Can you describe where that line occurs and then how a ghostwriter might negotiate or how an editor might negotiate that with a client and say, this really needs more work than just an edit?
It happens all the time.
Really?
Yeah, it really does. And you just talk to them, just explain what you're finding and what you might do. And you have to make sure that your time is going to be paid for as well, because unlike co-writing, and this is very close to co-writing because you're writing with someone, or usually, sometimes, in very rare situations, you might hardly get any access to the person at all. You just have to get what you're given, get a couple of hours of interviews from them and do the rest by yourself. But if you're sort of having a reasonably regular contact with them, then you can say, look, this isn't quite working as you think. This is what I think we need to do. This is what I think we need to add. I need extra from you about this. I need to go and find out about that unless you can tell me where to go to find out about it. Always in these sort of situations, developing a good and trustworthy relationship with the client is absolutely paramount.
One of the things I'm hearing also is that there could both be the challenge of you need to beef up the work, like the person, your client has like an outline and you're needing to beef it up, or they've given you so much and you need to winnow it out. What are the challenges of each of those and how do you approach each of those circumstances?
Fortunately, I like doing both things. That's a good start. I love getting a mass of material and thinking, what's in here that will satisfy the reader they want? It's a challenge I really enjoy. And fleshing things out, that's also something that comes naturally to me as a creative writer. I can just think, oh, what if we had more about this and this and this and this? So, but both scenarios are quite usual when you're writing a book in those circumstances.
That makes me think of another thing that you need to be factoring in, not only sort of understanding the client and their voice and all that, but also understanding the audience. And I think that when we're writing for ourselves, we have a sense, that we develop over time of who our ideal reader is. And I can imagine that the ideal reader that the client has in mind might be different than the ideal reader that starts forming in the mind of the ghostwriter. And that could be a circumstance of the person thinks they're writing for this audience, but they're actually writing for this audience. Or, they're trying to write for this audience, but they're being unsuccessful reaching them. Talk a little bit about how you negotiate the audience question of a ghostwriting project.
That's so interesting. That's such a good point. Yes, sometimes people think they're writing one kind of book and it's actually another kind of book just because of what they want to put on the page. I'm going through this at the moment with a memoir that I'm ghostwriting. It looked at first as though it was one kind of thing. And then when I sent him away to just pour everything out, which I decided was the best way to handle this material, something else came out entirely. So I wrote back to him and said, this is a different kind of book. What do you think of that? Do you want to steer it back to what we had been talking about before? Or are you happy about it being like this? And again, it's a dialogue because it's not your book. And sometimes it's not the author's book either, because it might be the editor's book. If it's a publishing company, if it's a publisher, it's actually the publisher in a ghostwriting situation. It's the publisher who decides what they want, and they're usually paying for it. So really, they are the client. And the author's name on it is the person who the material's being pulled out of by invisible person in the middle, which is the ghost.
Some of what you're saying is reminding me of co-authoring. And as you were saying, there are similarities and differences. Just talk about other ways in which you feel that ghostwriting is similar to or different from co-authoring.
Well, with ghostwriting, you are very much kind of the servant of other people. Although you might say, I don't think that idea will work, because of the following reasons. It's not your decision. It's not your book. You are very much part of a team in which you're kind of the executor of everything, but you are not making the decisions unless they ask you and say, well, what do you think of this? What do you think we should do with this? How do you think we could make a book that will be satisfying out of this? But you can't really impose your will on it. And that might be hard for indie authors who are thinking of doing ghostwriting. On the other hand, it might be very liberating because there's no responsibility for those decisions. There's just the responsibility of delivering the thing that will satisfy the other people in the team. And the co-authoring is different, isn't it? Because a number of you are having your names on it and your identities, and you're being pictured as part of the marketing exercise as well. With ghostwriting, you are invisible. You don't have any of those marketing responsibilities afterwards, unless you particularly want to, but usually you don't. You disappear. And that actually might be quite refreshing for some authors who say, all I want to do is just write a book, just do the writing, let someone else do all that stuff. And it is a way of using your writing skills to just write and do those bits that you know you do best. And then you can return recharged to your own work if you've got something else afterwards.
Yeah, there have been times, a couple of very minor times, and nothing of strategic consideration, but in co-authored books, like my co-author would give me some material and I'd be like, I don't know. I don't necessarily feel comfortable including that. And like a really easy example, so people think I'm not like wrestling with moral dilemmas, is having co-authored a book with Michael LeBron. It was about, it was a book about being an author speaker, and we had a section on travel, and he felt very strongly about recommending travel insurance. And I was like, I don't object to travel insurance, but I don't get general travel insurance myself. So I felt uncomfortable putting it out there as if this is, I never like to recommend that people do something that I myself am not doing. And so we solved that very easily just by specifying, this is advice from Michael. But I wouldn't have even brought that up. If I was ghostwriting for someone else, I'm like, sure, travel insurance, that's fine, because my name isn't behind it, as you're pointing out.
Yeah.
I think that something that is very interesting is hearing how much the ghostwriter has to be sort of a therapist for their client. So what are some tips? And I think that the tips for this would probably be good for anyone who is having any kind of creative interaction with anyone else about, this could be potentially very sensitive territory. How do you negotiate that, you're writing something different than you think you're writing, or you really need a ghostwriter, not an editor? Do you have any general tips about how to have those conversations?
Well, you also have to start off with what they want of the book and explain if, say, something is going in a very different direction from what you originally discussed. Explain how, the natural story in the material is maybe not what they thought it was, and explore whether they'd be happy with that or whether they want to give you more material for the original idea. And also, you have to like the person you are ghostwriting for. That's very important. You have to like them and respect what they do. And they've got to like and respect you. And if that mutual respect is there and you really listen to each other, then that's most of the battle. It becomes a battle if you're not listening to each other, or if one is thinking, oh, that so-and-so knows nothing, or they've wasted my time a lot and they're not respecting what I'm doing. So you have to be good at being able to explain, maybe in non-writerly terms, for instance, why you're asking them to show, not tell. If they're saying, I felt bullied, for instance, and you explain to them, that sounds whiny. They might not respond very well to that because they felt bullied for a start and they think you're not listening to them.
Yeah.
But if you say, can you explain to me exactly how? And then tell them what you're aiming to do, and that you are aiming to get the reader to feel the way they do, then that's a lot of the battle. So really think about it from their point of view. You do have to be a bit of a therapist. Therapist is a good word. On the other hand, if you're going to be producing a book that's for an audience, it can't be just therapy. Therapy is what someone does in private to just get rid of what they need to get rid of. If it's going on the page into books, it's got to be something that will also be valuable to a reader. And that sometimes is something that you have to explain to people as well.
Yeah, I think that a clear difference between ghostwriting and co-authoring is with co-authoring, you're generally working with a fellow writer who is familiar. If you say show, don't tell, or if you talk about tone or whatever, then the person's probably going to understand whereas you can't assume that in a ghostwriting scenario.
Yeah, you have to be good at explaining why you're doing things in language that you probably haven't had to use for a while.
Yeah. I think that in itself could be a great craft exercise. Not that I'm recommending people become ghostwriters for this reason, but having to explain to someone why your gut instinct is they need to do something different, but now you have to explain it to someone who doesn't have that same vocabulary could be very educational for the writer.
Ghostwriters are often also good editors and good writing coaches because it's all similar. You're getting the best out of someone else's material and you're explaining how to do that and why. And you're actually doing it as well, but you are still having to get the material from them so that you can build what they want.
Yeah. And you were saying the importance of each party respecting the other, ideally liking each other. If someone contacts you with a potential ghostwriting job, how do you go about getting that sense that they're going to be someone you can work successfully with?
Just talking to them usually by email to start with, because I want to see just how they can put things down, even though they're not going to be doing the writing. I want to make sure that they're serious enough. And this is a problem. I get so many emails from people saying, my story is amazing. My life story is great. If you're interested in writing it, here's my phone number. And you can waste so much time on people who actually have no idea what they're asking. They don't really know if they even want a book. So something you have to be very good at is quickly finding ways to find the people who are serious. And you can gauge that quite quickly by sending emails that are quite businesslike, but also friendly, asking, what they really want, what they really are looking for out of a book. Like editors already do, if they're dealing with, say, developmental editing clients for the first time. There are a lot of people who I get contacted by who are looking for developmental edits on their books, but then I can see after one or two emails, they're not really. So you just develop a sense of how serious they are about it. The person you are ghostwriting for is going to have to put in quite a lot of time and dedication. They're going to have to stick at it in the same way as you are. I mean, you're going to do far more, but they are going to have to be committed to giving you the information you need and giving you feedback when you need it and all those sorts of things. So those are the things that I look for, first of all. And once we've developed that kind of rapport and understanding in a few emails, we've usually come to respect each other.
Or you're not talking anymore at that point.
Or it's obviously going to be a waste of time or not possible for other reasons. But so you get to know just by starting off being professional and saying, what do you want of this book? What do you have in mind? Are you planning to self-publish? Are you planning to look for a publisher? Something I always explain is if they are looking for ghostwriting, that ghostwriting is usually paid for by a publisher. And that means it's expensive because of the amount of time taken. And the publisher funds it because they know they are going to get big sales out of it. There are ways around this. There are ways to sort of structure things and build the book more gradually with the author doing a lot more. And I've done that too. And effectively, I've written the book, but I've asked them for stages of content. And that's been more manageable on a cost basis than it would be if they just talked and I wrote everything down and made a book out of it, which is the traditional way of doing it for publishers.
Let's talk a little bit about payment, that whether someone is, let's pretend the listener is either maybe thinking about using a ghostwriter or becoming a ghostwriter. What informs the expense or the charges that a ghostwriter would make for that kind of service?
Essentially, it's the amount of time you're going to be spending on it. And you have to remember, if you are offering this as a service, that the book does not really do you any good. If you do it for too little money, you will have wasted your time. However, if you are doing it to test the waters, you might offer your time at a much lower rate than you would eventually charge. If you knew exactly what you were doing, you could prove you've done this before, those sorts of things, if you had a track record. You do have to make sure you're paid for your time. You also have to be very good at managing your time. Any freelance will already know how to do this. And that means not just writers, but plumbers as well. Everyone who works as a freelance will already have a sense of what their time is worth for particular kinds of tasks.
And what are some red flags for if someone is looking for a ghostwriter or they want to make sure that they as a ghostwriter don't commit these? What are some red flags about what indicates a problematic relationship in the future, possibly?
Well, if they don't want to commit to anything in writing, and that again is why I always start off with emails, because I want to set out very clearly what is wanted, what we'll do. You don't necessarily also have to get to a formal contract, but you have to make sure that everyone clearly understands what they're getting and what will be done. And that's essentially, if they won't say clearly what they want, then they haven't really thought about what they want and they'll be wasting your time. And another red flag is, again, it's money, I'm afraid. It sounds sort of a bit presumptive, but you do have to find out very quickly what their budget is and if they've thought about a budget. Because sometimes what people do is they will say, I'll give you 50% of the proceeds. And you can't work like that. Write a big book without payment. Go and write your own.
Yes.
And, so you really have to make sure that they are not afraid of thinking about money and discussing money with you. You can do this in a very friendly way. You can say, forgive me for asking, but I have to ask, do you have a budget for this? Do you have any thoughts about this? You can do it in a non-aggressive way that doesn't make you sound like a horrible mercenary, but you do have to ask that.
Yeah, it seems as if someone who's looking for a ghostwriter might have no idea. And so they might not say this out loud, but their thought might be, I have no idea if this is going to be like $500 or $50,000. Are there resources that people can go to so that are thinking of hiring? And I think this would also be interesting for people who are thinking of becoming a ghostwriter, to just give them a sense of like, oh, my book is about at this level of completeness, or the material I've collected is about this thorough. How many digits are in the number that I'm going to have to set aside for a ghostwriter? Any tips there?
Well, they are probably going to have to set aside probably 5 digits at least because of the time taken. But there are ways to edit material which can make the process a lot faster for everyone. If they've got something that's halfway decent, you actually might just be doing a very good rewriting job with the market in mind and knowing where to fill in gaps. Or you might be writing the whole thing from scratch, extracting all the information from them. That's obviously going to take a lot of hours, and also research of the market, research of other things. It all depends how much work they're going to require from you.
So the last question I wanted to ask, because I think that this is what might stand in the way of people who would otherwise consider ghostwriting, is that idea of putting in all this work, putting in all this creative work, and then not being able to share with the world that you were the person who contributed to this. Can you just talk to that a little bit about like dealing with producing a book, but it's never going to have your name on it?
Well, one book I produced, I was walking along to my local station and I noticed that at the bus stop, there was a big poster for the book I'd written. It had been on my hard drive. It hadn't ever been on the other guy's hard drive. And it was there at a bus stop. Another time, I saw a tube poster. I took a selfie of myself next to it. Nobody knew why, but it was my book. You do get that all the time. I made that and nobody knows. And I've seen reviews where people have said, oh, you can tell this writer's really done those things. No, I hadn't. But it's part of the joy of writing a book for someone else like that is that you can just understand what it's like to be them and how great it would be to be them, be able to do some of those things as well. It is great if you enjoy inhabiting characters, but you do have to just let it go. I was at a meeting once at a publisher where one of the ghost-written books I'd done was being presented to the sales team, and the author, the famous one, was standing at the front of the room with the book and being adored, because he was very, very good looking, being adored by the sales team who were kind of swooning. And I was standing at the back and I'd written everything. He was talking about it. I'd written it. No one even looked at me.
Well, I think that the fact that you have a big grin on your face as you're saying this is probably the perfect characteristic for a ghostwriter to have. You have to be able to think of these circumstances and kind of get a chuckle out of it, and not think of those circumstances and say, darn it, they should have been looking at me, not the handsome guy in the front of the room. But
and you can still be so proud of the work. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you love writing, if you love taking a pride in telling a story, this gives you the chance to tell stories that aren't really yours, haven't been given to you by the universe in most of the other ways. Someone comes along and they've got it, and you can have the fun of making it, but do make sure you get properly rewarded for it.
Yeah, that's all great. Well, Roz, I know you have some resources for people who have further questions about ghostwriting. Do you want to share what those are and just general information about where people can find out more about you online?
Well, I have a course on Teachable for ghostwriters. You do have to already be an accomplished writer because you have to really know what you're doing. As you can tell, your craft is what will see you through. But it's a great way to use your craft if you are already quite well set up. So you can find that by, probably the best thing to do is to email me. That's rozmorriswriter@gmail.com. Or you can find me on my website, which is rozmorris.org. And I'm ROZMORRIS.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the editing and design stream of the Self-Publishing with ALLi podcast, sponsored by BookVault. Sell high-quality print-on-demand books directly to readers worldwide and earn maximum royalties selling directly. Automate fulfillment and create stunning special editions with BookVault Bespoke. Visit bookvault.app today for an instant quote. This podcast is also sponsored by Gatekeeper Press, the all-inclusive gold standard in publishing, offering authors 100% rights, royalties, satisfaction, and worldwide distribution. Gatekeeper Press, where authors are family. And if you haven't already, we invite you to join our organization and become a self-publishing ally. You can do that at allianceindependentauthors.org.